There it is. It's recording. I was here stumbling. Done. Welcome, my friends and fellow gaming enthusiasts. This is the what would be termed breakfast with the Fat Man, right? Hey, excuse me a moment because I'm dismantling the overhead rig that I got set up so I can do my face down or view down of the various game modules and things that I'm revisiting. I try not to use a review because while it is a review, these are old game systems. They're not new to me. They're old and they're vulnerable, and I'm still working my way through them, bringing myself back up to speed, at least familiarizing myself with these things, which is kind of the point. I just recently, this morning, I think I concluded the last of my books for space opera for FGU's space opera stuff, and now starting on GW's Twilight 2000 game system, which I invite you to, ride along with me and enjoy as best you can, or not. Maybe find them informative, interesting. If nothing, they're going to be on the internet. So someday somebody's going to go, I want to know about this. Maybe they'll see something from me about it. That's not the topic of my conversation, obviously, based on the heading. Now, always been a sci-fi fan. Always been a fan of the space opera type games of sci-fi. I recently ran across something on YouTube about Buck Rogers, and it reminded me of this TV series that I saw when I was a kid. I actually got it in my Netflix queue, so I can video and go back and watch the first season. I guess that's all there was available as season one. I'm also, in lieu of reading at night before going to bed, I'm slowly working my way through DS9 in this halfway through season 2. Although, in fairness, I'm leapfrogging certain episodes because certain things I like better than others. That's the topic for Star Trek. The thing that's always bugged me to some degree about Star Trek, even when I was younger, was the fact that they always held to this high ideal that they're not an aggressive entity, i.e., they're not into expanding territory by force. So Starfleet is this exploration and diplomacy force first, and then defense force second. And there's some parallels to that in the Japanese defense forces of the modern era to some degree. Ideally, they only defend the Federation territory from outside incursions. They don't actively go out, which is also a fallacy. If you watch enough of the TV series, you know at some point the Federation always sticks its nose into somebody else's business. And that tends to often lead to bigger conflicts. Now they take that high moral ground, and say, well, we're doing it to better these other people, or to keep somebody bigger and badder from exploiting them or vandalizing them or what have you. So that gave me the genesis of what my topic is. Despite repeated wars and attacks, why does Starfleet and the Federation resist on creating a militarized force? That's what I'm going to discuss. We know the philosophy behind the Federation, the mindset behind it. We also know, historically speaking, in every race that's a key member were militarily active at some point in their history. Some more so than others. Are they aggressively expansionistic like the Romulans, or are they just aggressive like the Klingons? Yeah, actually, they were. Now, when they supposedly grew up or matured or mellowed out and become this join the membership with the Federation to promote peace and harmony and exploration and self development and so on and so forth, which is fine. And yet, time and time again, the Federation comes up against somebody who doesn't have those views, those mindsets. For most of its existence, the Federation had to deal with the Klingons and the Romulans in one form or another. Mostly the Klingons. They're the most aggressive. They were the closest aggressive species, and they resisted becoming federalized, if you will, even after their empire started to disintegrate because of the loss of one moon, which I highly question. It sure sounded convenient for the storyline, for that to happen, but I still question how can you have a stellar empire the size of that they do, and then the loss of one moon and its energy producing components doom your entire star empire. Uh, Maybe. I just don't think they explored that one very deep. That would have been better if that would have been allusions to the fact that that particular moon was their only source of the lithium crystals or whatever it is that in their entire sphere of operations, which would suggest that this the same for other species. How many lithium producing worlds does the Federation control? 2, maybe. So now we're talking strategic issues, right? Now, I've run a number of gaming campaigns back in the day, past as Star Trek, circa 90s, late 80s, early 90s. They were producing modules and source books up through movie C4 or 5 or 6. I think after that they stopped, or I stopped purchasing them. I don't know if they came out. I know that there's Star Trek Adventures today. I hear quite a bit about that. I've not seen it, not read it, but I hear a lot about it on our various channels and on YouTube. There's this resurgence in the Discovery, the new Discovery TV series or whatever. I'm a bigger fan of DS9 myself, but that's neither here nor there. The when I ran the games, a lot of my players struggled with the high science mindset, the high hard science mindset of Star Trek. That's what sets Star Trek apart from most of the other space opera games, or genres. So if you compare Star Trek and Star Wars, which they unfortunately get a lot of comparison, I think they're apples and oranges. Other than the fact they're both set in space, they're completely different from each other, and even their approaches to how they sell their story are different. And Star Trek hard science is extremely valued. You emphasize things like the science officer and the medical officer. They play very important roles. They see it in episodes all the time. That there are many more foes out there than just an aggressive alien race to deal with. You're dealing with pandemics and crises and ecological disasters and natural disasters and man-made disasters and disasters of the mind and disasters of the physics and physique and so on and so forth, and then there's all the personal drama interacting and personal building and discovery and all that stuff. It's quite different from your traditional high fantasy or sci-fi high fantasy. So as a player or as a game master, I give my players an option. We could play in the true sense of Star Trek. You're basically going to be crew members of a starship that's going to be doing things similar to what you see in the Enterprise movies, TV series. Or we can take this alternate timeline or this alternate worldview, which I think, if in a real Federation developed, would be far closer to the truth than what this high, almost communist society that we see that's the Federation has become. Like I said, this is why I like DS9. DS9 gives you this gritty, real world scenario look to what the future would be like when you're dealing with things like money. Come on, and everything's provided for you in the Federation, and yet over and over and over again it suggests that it's not. It's provided to you if you're a member of the Federation of the Starfleet, And maybe on certain core Federation worlds, you don't have to worry about hunger or places to live and things like that. You don't have to pay rent and you don't have to buy your food. But there's still an economy there. There's still things. Even the captains and the crew, they collect stuff. They collect tchotchkes and knickknacks and relics and what have you. And you think that, well, where did the Romulan ale come from? How do they pay for it? It didn't just show up, they didn't just replicate it, or it's not the tradition, it's not the real thing. So that suggests that there's something going on there under the scene that they don't want to show in the movies, or they sidestep, just like the military. If you look at certain starships, they are quite powerful for an exploration vessel. And that makes sense for quite a number of reasons. A being the one I just said, that the Federation has fought a number of wars since its beginning. Its very existence owes to a war, or the avoidance of a larger war. If you go and watch the Enterprise series, the first Klingon War, the second Klingon War, the three Romulan wars of various levels. Oh, the Klingon or the Cardassian War, and then the Dominion War, and the encounters against the Borg, and then there's, if you go off canon and go into the wider world, in like uh, Starfleet battles, for example, there's even more races that are aggressive and more conflicts that brew. And I tell my players, I say, in my alternate reality, you know, military and space exploration, while conducive to joint operations, are two different things. So the Federation actually would maintain a strategic militaristic core of vehicles and or starships and militarized troops and everybody else. So this is the big stick, and I actually tried to write a short novel along that line too, and I've had several, like I said, several good campaigns placed in it, and I think the gaming, that my friends were quite, they enjoyed it, and we approached it from the perspective of military first, defending the Federation, not expanding the Federation. So we're still following that Federation mindset. We're not the alternate Mirror Darkly universe, but occasionally your Enterprise and its cohorts run into species of people that just don't want to play ball by the Federation's view of things. They want to be aggressive. So, had the Dominion attacked DS9 in my alternate universe, first line Federation vessels would have been things like the Enterprise, would have been these heavily armed exploration vessels, and they would have pretty much had the same results of being slightly under armored and undergunned for the scenario. And the Dominion would have got the wrong impression. And then they would have came through the wormhole and they would have come after, or we'd have sent some actual warships through the wormhole, and they would have come up against some stuff that would have beat them senseless. Because the technology's there. The Federation has that capability. If you were to take a Galaxy-class starship and militarize it, for starters, you would have half as much crew on board, or the so-called civilian complement would have been replaced by a version of Mako, which I have a tendency to believe that the Federation has made a horrible mistake of not continuing having a dedicated Marine Corps. Now, if you look at the old school game stuff, the old school Star Trek stuff, I've got the Starfleet manual someplace, and a buddy of mine's brother had the original print. And they have a Marine Corps. Starfleet does have a version of Mako, and the red shirts are not it. The red shirts are the ship security. Well, the Marines are the next level up. These are the actual ground fighters. Now, does the Federation maintain a standing army? Well, no. And in reality, and I would hold true that I think I held that true in my version of my alternate universe of Star Trek. The Federation Okay, no, there's no real point in any large starfaring king empire or entity to have a massive major ground military. We see that in Star Wars with the legions of stormtroopers and the Imperial Army. Now, the differences in there between the two genres, of course, of the two sides of the genre, is in Star Wars the Empire has to maintain control over a lot of territory and terrain. So having boots on the ground is imperative, and you have such a volume, excuse me, such a volume of worlds that you're going to have such a large. I love my hair, right? I'm due for a haircut. These stupid hats I wear doesn't help. Doesn't help. The 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 Empire has such a large number of worlds that they have to control that it's imperative that they maintain the ground forces to keep control of them. The Navy can only do so much from space. On the other hand, that's the same thing. The Navy can control quite a lot because we can rain devastation down on a planet. So in Star Trek, it's the same thing. We can pinpoint, we don't have world shields to certain degrees. We can pinpoint the destruction of, well, I guess they do have some world shields, but we can pinpoint destruction. We can use commando units, candle sign operations, crack members of the starship's crew to go down and eliminate a problem. You don't need to maintain ground order. And yet, over and over and over again, we still see it. Cardassians had an army, although they didn't call it that. The Bajorans freedom fighters fought against the occupying forces. Well, who were these occupying forces that they were fighting against? The Klingons, the entire Klingon race is an army. They just mitigate from the ship to the ground. And yet to suggest that they're going to maintain 100 ships in orbit so they can put 1,000 or 10,000 boots on the ground to control the planet is ridiculous. So obviously they're bringing in Klingon warriors from somewhere, and whether they have an actual military organization or not, well, just up to how you want to look at it. Now, the original FASA, some of the source books allow for that, and the original TV series, the books that supported the TV series, like the Starfleet manual, allowed for it. So, in that aspect, going back to Star Wars, the stormtroopers are the Marine Corps of the Empire versus its ground army. So, they spend as much time doing shipboard actions and boarding actions and orbit to ground assaults and so on and so forth as they do occupying territory. The tradition of the Marine Corps, as the United States utilizes it to some degree. So, as players, I think they enjoyed the option. The trick as the GM was I had to maintain this true line of mindset for Star Trek. So, but my argument was, okay, like I said, I don't care. I can get 10 hours of sleep and still be on it. The bad guy comes over the fence. The Enterprise and her cohorts comes up against the bad guy, tries negotiations, tries diplomacy, tries overt force to get them to knock off whatever it is they're doing, and they still persist. That's when they call up the real Navy, and the warships show up, and it's whether it's the 10th Fleet or it's the Red Fleet or whatever you call it. They call up these militarized versions of the same Starfleet vessels. So, surprise and shock when the Dominion runs up against another Galaxy-class starship that's got double the firepower, that carries twice as much shielding, has triple the armor, and can take a beating and just dish it out. It carries, contingent of heavily armed Marines that can take on the Jem'Hadar and hand them their hats, or at least give them a run for their money. And so the big stick comes out, beats the other guy senseless enough that he wants to go home and not rethink his actions. And we see an evolution of that to some degree in the latter series, the latter TV series, when the Borg's introduced and the Dominion War. We see larger warships, larger starships being built. We see more heavily designed, heavily armed warships or starships coming out. The Akira class comes to mind. The Defiant, definitely. Defiant's a small ship, but can you imagine the Defiant philosophy that went into the Defiant on the Galaxy class scale? The Sovereign, that's kind of where the Sovereign comes out, I guess. We see more of a more heavily armed peacekeeping force, which was a necessity. They had to. If the Borg had come at the Federation in full force, there wouldn't be a Federation. And we've seen that in Voyager. That was part of the end game of Voyager, was to give you this shock and awe of just how powerful and how big the Borg were or are. And now the Voyager also derailed the Borg to some degree. So who's to say what the next big threat would be if they take a new Star Trek franchise forward? Unfortunately, I don't know how that's going to go, because I enjoyed the reintroduction of this Enterprise based off similarities with Captain Kirk and stuff, but the fact it is an alternate universe take on things, I'm not overly thrilled with. I mean, it's a creative issue, differences between the companies making it and the writers and things like that. Okay, fine, but there's such a rich universe there. Why can't you just recreate what was there and modernize it? I mean, think about how much better the original Star Trek TV series would have been if they'd had much bigger budget than they did at the time. I'm just throwing it out there, right? You wouldn't have to do this alternate reality BS that seems to be the thing nowadays. Sad, but I believe that Star Trek the Federation makes a lot of mistakes, and they keep making those same mistakes over and over again. They keep paying for it over and over again. How many thousands of Starship Federation, Starfleet crew members died because, for starters, they sent terribly inadequate starships up against some powerful foes. Some of it was impromptu. The Battle of Wolf, whatever the hell it is, Sector 01, when the Borg Q shows up and they got Picard at the helm, what's Federation do? They scrape together whatever the hell they can get that comes fast enough, stuff trees, tree branches, and snow and ice up there, dropping down on top of the RV up there. Curious what the noise is. So you see some Starfleet vessels participate in that battle that were woefully undergunned and woefully undershielded for that operation. They had no business being there, other than as just decoys and cannon fodder to give the others a chance. They really had no business being there, and you see that a lot of situations keep popping up. Now later, when we see the Dominion Wars in DS9, well, now you're talking a different set. Now we've got a lot more potent fleets showing up. We got fleets of hundreds and hundreds of ships, and we actually see attack craft and fighter craft of sorts, and ships of the line and supporting vessels and so on and so forth. And yet mixed in with those are still some ships that really have no older designs and stuff. They have no business being there, or they're those purely scientific vessels with a few phaser banks. Why would you send those in? I mean, how desperate are you? Is that what it is to give you that level of desperation? Well, you're convinced me. That just reinforces my argument that there's a bunch of insane idiots in charge of the Federation. Even the Vulcans know better than that. I mean, what is it? You've seen that in the Enterprise series when what's her face? They first encounter the Klingons, and she says, attack. We attack them. We don't. Was it Discovery? We don't play around with them. We attack them. That's what we. The Klingons don't understand diplomacy. They don't want to hear it. The Vulcans realize that the only thing you can do with something like a mad dog is beat it over the head with a big stick. You drive it off or kill it. There's logic in that, right? There's logic in that thinking. So there's not logic in some of the pacifistic facade that the Federation constructs for itself, and they keep paying for it over and over again. I think personally that's my take on it. And as GM, I've discovered much easier to play a Federation-based, Star Trek-based game system when you have that kind of option available. And there you have it. Like 35 cents worth on the subject.